Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. This is Jim Ostrowski with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy and our Environmental Support Division. And I welcome you to our first Michigan Healthy Climate listening session. Glad to see got so many people on. We've got about 64 people logged on right now, and I'm sure many others will be joining us as we get things underway here. I want to go through a couple housekeeping guidelines before I turn it over to James. First thing you'll notice is that all lines are muted. And when we get to the comments part today, I will let you know how to unmute your line. So we'll go over that in just a minute. Also, we are recording the webinar the session, and we'll post it up to our YouTube channel as soon as we can. Our agenda for this morning, we're going to do some intros. James is going to do a presentation. Then we're going to open it up to comments, and that's really the majority of the time we're going to be spending today is the comments. So in terms of intros, I'm going to let James go ahead and come on and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is James Clift. I am one of the deputy directors at the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy.
All right, thanks. And also you'll be seeing and hearing from Kimber Franz. So Kimber, you want to say hi?
Hi, this is Kimber Franz. I am a management assistant with Eagle, and I support James in the Office of Climate and Energy.
Thanks. And so Kimber will be reading off the names for commenters. All right, so with that, James, I'm going to turn over to you and let you share your screen and do your presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Stop sharing your screen, maybe?
Maybe I'll try that.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Again, my name is James Clift. So I'm the deputy director that kind of oversees a lot of kind of the policy and engagement work at the department. In addition to the Office of Climate and Energy, the Office of EJ Public Advocate, the Office of the Clean Water Public Advocate, the Office of the Great Lakes, the communication folks, and the legislative folks all are kind of in my team here at the department. I'm sure you've heard a lot about kind of the climate work that's going on in the state, but what I plan to do is kind of walk through kind of from a process wise, how the department is going about putting together the My Healthy Michigan plan, and really appreciate kind of everybody kind of joining us today and providing kind of some input for us. Again, just starting with a quick screen here. This is kind of, I don't think, new news to anybody here, but obviously when we start talking about decarbonizing our economy, it is really a transition to all aspects of our economy. Nationally, you know, transportation is now the #1 kind of carbon emitter throughout the country. Michigan, it's actually #2, but really you kind of see it neck and neck there. But you know, industry, residential, commercial, agricultural, all kind of big components there. Then we see, you know, we hear a lot about the reduction that needs to happen. But if you look at the total greenhouse gas emissions throughout the country, we're really not kind of seeing that downward trend that we're going to need to see. So the idea of the plan is, you know, how do we get on that right trajectory going forward, and how can, you know, Michigan help with those efforts? The governor, you know, kind of set this off very early in her administration. In kind of 2 ways. The executive order created the Council of Climate Solutions. And that council is going to advise Eagle on the creation of the My Healthy Climate Plan. So we've got 13 individuals kind of from the private sector and experts in this area that have been appointed to the council, and really trying to figure out what are those top opportunities to start to see those emission reductions in Michigan. And even though the plan talks about decarbonization by 2050, we really are looking at this kind of next 9 years. Between now and 2030, what needs to happen? what needs to happen immediately to start getting us on this right track. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how this plan will come together, but really kind of a not thinking way off in the distance on how we magically think this is going to happen. What needs to happen on the ground today? We're also trying to be extremely sensitive to the extent that, this is going to need to change things in our economy. How are those impacts going to kind of come home to roost across Michigan? Where are the disparities of impact? Where might they occur? Where do we need to pay particular attention to kind of just transition changes in our labor force going forward, kind of job training that might be needed? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those topics. The executive directive basically is the one that kind of puts forth the requirement that we come up with a plan that will take us to carbon neutrality by 2050. You see this very kind of ambitious interim goal, the 28% by 2025, and then 40% by 2040. Well, you of course heard the president recently who says, nope, that's not fast enough. We want to see more things happen more quickly. So again, a lot of, I think, pressure on the states to try to get this work kind of off the ground. This kind of shows kind of how we have organized the process within EGLE. So, right in the middle there, we have the Council on Climate Solutions. Below the Council on Climate Solutions, we've created 5 work groups, and we think these are the areas that kind of are the primary areas that we're going to need to see changes in. As soon as you start to try to group things like this, we're already kind of identifying issues that kind of fall between them. So a lot of what we'll be trying to do is to make sure that, things don't fall between the cracks. But, as we see energy production, transmission, distribution, and storage, all about how we generate power within the state. Number 2, looking at our buildings and housing stock. How do we increase the efficiency of those, both the existing building stock and any new building stock that is built in the future. The 3rd, transportation and mobility, critical, to this work kind of ongoing. How do we make this transition to electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and what's that mean to Michigan's economy that has been so based in this area for decades, for 100 years, really. Next one is natural working lands and forest products. And then the 5th one, energy intensive industries. Obviously, Michigan has been an industrial state for a long time, and they are a significant user of, carbon emitters in the state. How do we transition those to be kind of more friendly to the environment? And then off to the sides of the council, you see the 2 kind of some of the advisory groups that are already there. Let's start to the ones, on the left, the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice, MAC-EJ. That's actually already been established by Regina Strong, our EJ public advocate, and has been working with this group on a number of issues across the state. But they've kind of, between them and they've kind of created a new kind of entity called the Climate Justice Brain Trust. And really, they're going to be looking, as we develop this plan, to make sure that, we're being very inclusive about how we're thinking about the development of this plan, where those impacts are going to occur, and how do we make sure that, we don't leave people behind. So we see this impacting every single one of the work groups all across the table, about kind of how really thinking as much as we can about how this might impact kind of the world that we live in, the state that we live in, kind of moving forward. Related to that, we're also looking at what we call a just transition. How is this going to change kind of the labor force in Michigan? Which jobs that exist today may not exist in the future? And what are the new jobs of the future that we want to make sure that we've got job training programs set up to make sure that we're employing Michigan residents kind of moving forward. On the right side, we've got the Council of Future Mobility and Electrification. So This has been an entity that the governor established, and they've been looking at this issue of transportation and mobility. And they'll be working very closely with that transportation and mobility work group to try to create that portion of the plan. We see the work product from all these work groups will be kind of channeled into Eagle and the council. And the two of us, the council and Eagle, will be working together to kind of craft the work product coming out of the work groups into the My Healthy Climate Plan to present to the governor. The timeline we're looking at is, approximately the end of this year is when the governor would like that plan on her desk. But we see, again, those arrows going back and forth, lots of kind of back and forth between these entities as we craft this plan. And then, of course, then the hard work starts. Then we get into plan implementation. And really what we're looking at is trying to get as much buy-in from the private sector, the nonprofit sector, foundations, university. How do we all work together to make sure then the plan becomes kind of a reality in Michigan moving forward? Kind of this slide kind of shows some of the co-chairs of the various work groups that we have right now. And on each work group, what we have is somebody from either the private or nonprofit sector matched with somebody kind of within state government. So making sure that we're getting as much input as possible. We had opened up kind of signups for this work, the work groups themselves. We have more than 500 individuals kind of working with these work groups, trying to put this plan together, trying to really kind of get that broad base of ideas, making sure that we don't kind of leave certain ideas kind of out of the mix. Really important is we are looking for input, and today is part of that process of trying to get input into this process. But to the extent that people have detailed kind of suggestions or ideas, really urge you to put in written submissions to the work groups themselves. And we'll leave the screen up here for a little bit, and you can jot down. And on the Climate Solution webpage, these emails also are there. But try to forward directly to the work group your ideas. It will be taking notes. We'll be providing this information to the council and the work groups. But to the extent that you've got detailed comments, we really kind of urging people to submit written comments to the work group so they can take it into consideration as their work kind of moves forward. Again, we really appreciate all of you kind of joining us today. And we're looking forward to kind of hearing what you have to say. Couple of just then more process issues. This is the first of 2 working sessions. The next one will be on May 5th in the evening. And how we're going to go about kind of calling on people here is that we're going to start with the people that were pre-registered, either through email or when they registered for the conference. And Kimber will call your name. And we'll give you, kind of 3 minutes to kind of put in your comments. We won't be responding immediately kind of to whatever comments or questions you have, but when we wrap up at the end, to the extent that people have kind of process questions, I will try to address those. We have already heard a lot of input about, our questions related to, is this going to be in the plan? Well, none of that's been determined yet. The plan is still in its, infancy here, just ideas in people's heads. So again, get those suggestions in, but we can't tell you at this point what's going to be included or not included. There's nothing off the table. We can tell you that right now. So again, we're looking for that input from you. And with that, let's move on to the public comment portion. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, James, for your presentation. So now we're going to take public comment, and we're going to start out with the list of people who emailed us and people who pre-registered and indicated they want to make a comment. And like we indicated, we're going to try to keep it to about 3 minutes, if you would, to make sure we get everybody in. We've got about 100 people on right now, and a lot of you want to make comments. So I'm going to be keeping track of time as best I can with my phone here. And when you hit about the 3-minute mark or so, or when you got about a minute or so left, I'll let you know, I'll break in. But if you could, just to be respectful of everybody, keep your comments to about 3 minutes. So with that, I'm going to have Kimber go ahead and I'll let you know this too. After we get through the list of people who indicated they want to make a comment ahead of time, we'll open up to everyone else. So if anybody else wants to make a comment later, they can do that. And you can do that by clicking the raise hand icon, or if you're on the phone, and we do have a couple people on the phone. If you're on the phone, you can click the #2 button, and that'll raise your hand for us. So with that, I'm gonna have Kimber go ahead and read off the first name, and you can also read off who's on deck. So Kimber, go ahead.
Okay, the first name is Gary Milau, and the person on deck is Paul Weil.
All right, so Gary Milo, I'm going to try to find, and this takes me a minute here because I'm going to find your name and try to unmute you. So stand by just a second here. So I thought I saw, you said it was Gary? Oh, there he is. Okay, so Gary, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment. Make sure also you identify if you're with any particular organization. That helps us out. Thank you. Go ahead, Gary.
Well, good morning, and thank you to the council for this opportunity to tell you a bit about biomass energy. My name is Gary Milo, and I am the director of Michigan Biomass, which is a coalition of the state's biomass power generating plants. We are independent power producers selling wholesale renewable power to Michigan's regulated utilities under long-term contracts. Today, I'm asking the council to seriously consider power generation from organic byproducts like wood fiber as an appropriate tool for managing greenhouse gases. The 6 members of the Michigan Biomass Coalition have been producing reliable, renewable electricity from wood byproducts for about 35 years, and it has consistently been the state's second leading producer of renewable energy under Michigan's renewable portfolio standards. My message today is that biomass power has been largely absent from the energy sector discussion on carbon mitigation strategies. Doing biomass right means that it's done in concert with sustainable forestry and sound materials management practices. Doing biomass right is complex and can sometimes be hard to wrap your head around. So in these few minutes, I'd like to share with you what biomass power generation is and what it isn't. Biomass power does not drive forest management or markets for wood fiber. When done in concert with sustainable forest management, power generation from the resulting byproducts is a tool that's measurable, has measurable benefit. It offsets fossil carbon emissions and contributes to forest health and regeneration that leads to greater carbon sequestration than it would have otherwise. Locally generated power made from local biomass resources is not the same as the large-scale pellet export industry that has taken root in the US Southeast. Domestic biomass power production is tailored to the specific needs of the locally available resources and the higher priorities of its multiple stakeholders, commercial and non-commercial. It's this scope and scale that makes the ecological and carbon footprint of domestic biomass significantly different than that of biomass exports. Biomass is not a fossil fuel, and its biogenic carbon should not be treated the same in terms of climate changing greenhouse gases, a position supported by the US EPA under Presidents Obama and Trump. Full life cycle analysis have shown the climate impact of biomass power outperforms natural gas by a wide margin. Biomass power is baseload generation that energy and distribution planners say is vital to the reliability and resiliency of the bulk power supply system, generation and services needed today and beyond. In conclusion, biomass power done right, like we do it here in Michigan, can continue its contributions to healthy forests while offsetting fossil carbon emissions, supporting the grid, and extending the prosperity of the renewable circular economy into communities that rely on these local natural resources for jobs, prosperity, and quality of life. We look forward to participating in the work group process, and thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, Gary. That's really good. It's about 3 minutes exactly. So good job. All right, so thanks for your comment, Gary. Kimber, who do I have up next?
Next up is Paul Weil, and then on deck is Michael Schneider.
All right, Paul. So I'm looking for your name here. I'll find you and I will unmute you. There you are. All right, Paul, you can go ahead. Paul, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Thank you for this opportunity to voice my concerns regarding climate change and needed action. My name's Paul Weil. I live in the city of Royal Oak, and I'm on Royal Oak's Environmental Advisory Board and co-founder of the board's Sustainability and Climate Action Plan Task Force. In 2020, I worked closely with our city's sustainability manager to quantify the greenhouse gas emissions of city residents and businesses during the 2018 calendar year. The greenhouse gas inventory was done so that the city was capable of setting 2030 reduction goals that was in keeping with the recommended 2030 goals of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Royal Oak's Sustainability and Climate Action Task Force, the Environmental Advisory Board, and the city's commission unanimously approved a resolution to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 from our 2018 inventory. Now the task force is in the process of developing an action plan that enables Royal Oak to meet this 2030 goal. To do this, the task force has grouped the emissions into three sources: electricity consumption, transportation, and natural gas consumption. It should be noted that our 2018 inventory and goals did not include greenhouse gas emissions from food and personal consumption. These emissions are nearly impossible to measure across 60,000 people, and significant reductions to these categories were seen as politically unobtainable. Our task force fully understands that to successfully meet our 2030 goals for Royal Oak residents and businesses, we must do these three things: increase energy conservation and energy efficiency, increase the amount of electricity that is generated from renewable sources, and power all vehicles and appliances with renewable electricity. Royal Oak residents and businesses are not capable of doing these three things without legislation at the state level. Currently in Michigan, our public utilities and their renewable energy and energy waste reduction requirements are governed by 2016 Public Act 342. This public act is outdated and must be revised. The integrated resource plans required by our public utilities do not ensure that stated 2030 renewable energy plans will be met, and even if they are inadequate. The inadequacy is most notable with regards to space heating. Even if the 2030 public utility plan renewable energy with the public utility plan renewable energy portfolio, if residents and businesses make the switch from appliances that use natural gas to ones that use electricity, they will actually generate more greenhouse gas emissions because the electricity will still be generated. Too much electricity will still be generated from coal.
Hey, Paul, about 1 minute.
Okay, yeah, just really want to emphasize that there's going to be some legislation needed. I know that, what James presented was, all working within the administration, but I really feel that we really need to address Public Act 342. Just really want to emphasize that space heating is going to be our greatest challenge here in Michigan. We're a colder climate. We need to keep our houses warm. And one area that we really need to develop is geothermal wells and ones that people can, or residents and businesses can access. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for, this is going to be the most efficient way to generate heat from electricity with a geothermal heat pump, and tremendous costs can be saved if we're building, community geothermal wells. So yeah, that's all. Again, thanks for the opportunity to comment. Much appreciated.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Next up, Kimber.
Next up is Michael Schneider, and then on deck is Heather Davis.
All right. Okay, Michael, you've been unmuted at our end. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have some comments about what I think are counterproductive actions that have been taken recently that challenge our ability to achieve our goals on clean energy. Our challenge of expanding the production of green energy in Michigan includes making sure that we keep what we already have. Michigan now has more than 30 large wind farms and about 50 large-scale solar farms that have been developed since about 2007. Together, they produced about 6 million megawatt hours of electricity in 2019. Michigan's other source of CO2-free energy is nuclear power. One of Michigan's 3 nuclear plants, the Palisades Nuclear Generating Station, is scheduled to close in 2022, a year from now, despite being licensed by the NRC until 2031. Over the past 5 years, the Palisades plant has produced on average 6.3 million megawatt hours per year of electricity. This is an amount of annual clean energy production that is slightly more than, but nearly the same as the total annual wind and solar grid energy production that has been built up in Michigan over the past 14 years. Closing the Palisades plant will then effectively cancel all the progress the state of Michigan has made in moving toward grid scale carbon-free energy, and will put us right back where we were in 2006. No matter what you think the long-term solution in green energy generation should be, I hope you will agree that it makes no sense during our current climate crisis and period of trying to take urgent action to close down 9 years early a large source of CO2-free energy that will be replaced with power from fossil fuel. In fact, Consumers Energy has said they plan to buy another natural gas plant to replace it. The decision to close the Palisades plant should be reversed so it can run as long as its licensing allows, or until the fossil fuel plants are gone. Any renewable energy that is used to replace nuclear power won't be replacing fossil fuel and won't be reducing CO2. The most immediate and effective measure that we can take to reduce our carbon emissions is to ensure the continued use of our existing nuclear power plants. I ask those of you in positions of authority in Michigan's government to reverse this decision. I ask all of you to use your influence to keep the Palisades nuclear plant running. We can't afford to cancel out all the clean energy progress that's been made. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Michael. Okay, the next on deck, or the next person up is Heather Davis, according to Kimber, but I do not see a Heather Davis in attendance. So Heather, if you're under some different name, you can, when we open it up to everyone else, you can go ahead and raise your hand and we'll call on you at that point. Kimber, looks like who we got next?
After Heather Davis is Missy Stoltz, and then the person on deck would be Lewis Higgins.
Okay. And I'll let you guys know that Kimber did put in the chat the next people that are coming up in the lineup for the 10 people. So looking for Missy. There you are. Oops. Okay, Missy, you can mute your line and go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jim. And thanks everyone for all of the incredibly hard work that you're putting into this and the opportunity to provide comment today. I am so proud of the state of Michigan for the commitment that they are making to climate action. My name is Missy Stoltz. I'm the head of sustainability and innovations for the city of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I'm calling today to encourage the state to be bold, ambitious, and transformative as we work to create the My Healthy Climate Plan. And I'm really delighted to say that municipalities around the state stand ready to support you in this work. You've already heard from Royal Oak, and I know you're going to hear from a few others shortly on the line today and certainly in your next meeting. But we're actively working at the local level to achieve a just transition to decarbonization. And we need to work in partnership with the state to achieve our local goals as well as the state's goals. And we stand ready to partner with you in doing that. That said, as we move forward together in this essential work, I strongly encourage us to center two things in our efforts. The first is equity, especially thinking about low-income and BIPOC communities who continue to be impacted first and worst by climate change, by COVID, by systemic racism, by the policies that we've put in place, some intentional and some unintentional, that are disproportionately burdening these populations. Our efforts need to center them in all things that we do. The second thing that we need to center is our future and not our past. We need to invest in sustainable, family-sustaining jobs that pay a living wage, that help us create the Michigan we want, and not just the one that we have, which candidly is not safe and accessible and healthy to all. So I strongly encourage us to think about investments that put us on a path towards true decarbonization, and that actually provide this unique opportunity, perhaps in the pandemic, to sever relationships with things that are polluting our air and our water and declining our quality of life. And as we look for specific actions, we need to focus on powering our electrical grid with 100% renewable energy. We need to transition away from natural gas and fast, and we need to do that purposefully. We need to provide incentives such as direct rebates to help spur this transition. We need incentives for fuel switching, which we currently do not have in our system, which prevents people from even making really significant efficiency improvements, but they're not eligible for incentive or rebate programs because they're moving from one fuel to another. We need the state to adopt the 2021 building code and the zero code appendix so that municipalities such as mine can require new developments to be zero emissions developments. Simply put, we have to turn off the faucet of greenhouse gas emissions, and making sure that every new thing that we do as a zero emissions technology is one way that we can do that. And we need more choice in where and how we get our power. We also need state leadership to transform our weatherization program. Right now, we're pretty hamstrung in terms of who we can serve and how we can serve them. But as we go into our low-income residents' homes and help them find ways to stay safely and in a healthy environment, a comfortable environment, we're often hamstrung by the kinds of services we can provide. But what if we didn't have to be? What if we could actually provide the services that are so essential for helping our residents not just survive, but thrive in all aspects of their life? This transformation would be powerful. And of course, we need to be in alignment with the president's recent commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% by 2030. Encourage us finally to just continue to be bold, transformative, and perhaps a little audacious as we look to what is essential to protect the world for all of us. As was once said, we are the first generation that fully understands the impacts of climate change, and we're the last generation to do anything about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Missy. All right, next person up is Lewis Higgins, and then Kimber, who do we have after Lewis?
After Lewis is Nicole Card.
Okay, go ahead, Lewis. You should be able to unmute.
All right. Hi, my name is Lewis Higgins. I'm 18 years old. I was born and raised here in the best state in the union, Michigan, and I'm currently attending EMU. I wanted to make some comments regarding something more related to forest product work groups. And I agree with what Missy said, that we need to turn off the faucet right now. But the problem that I see is the title of this is that we need to become carbon neutral. And when big companies see that, they see the implication that there's carbon positive and carbon negative activities. And that leads to this idea being thrown around, which is carbon credits. And I think they are incredibly dangerous. If they're over relied upon, it's going to lead to large amounts of carbon being put into the atmosphere that are not going to have a good way to be removed. And I've seen the government endorse this. I was looking at a land management plan from the DNR, and they were talking about how forests could be used as a way to create carbon credits. And I don't think that that's justified, because Michigan is still part of the problem when it comes to climate change because of how our carbon capture mechanisms have been destroyed. If you look at pre-industrial levels, or pre-industrial times in Michigan, there were so many more forests and wetlands that we have destroyed. So just because we still have residual forests and wetlands doesn't give us a license to put more carbon into the atmosphere. Michigan is still net releasing more carbon than it was absorbing in pre-industrial times. Therefore, I think it's most important to invest in ways to get renewable energy available to citizens instead of allowing people to still pollute for a time. The United States simply is too wealthy to have a license to pollute. And this doesn't mean that forests aren't a critical part of the climate solution. I think that they are. And it's incredibly important to preserve our trees, our large trees specifically. And I think that the Pacific Northwest states have set a good example in creating a diameter restriction on public lands so that very large trees can't be cut. I think this would also solve a lot of the ecological problems that we are facing. To sum up my thoughts, I think carbon credits are a fool's gambit and they're dangerous. And that doesn't necessarily mean that creating carbon sinks and utilizing carbon sinks is a bad idea. It's important, it's vital to this. And that starts with vegetation management, but that does not give us any reason to not invest in renewables right now. That is what we need. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Great, thank you, Louis, for your comments. All right. Next up is Nicole Card, and then Kimber, who are the next couple of people we got coming up after Nicole?
After Nicole, there's Eric Ini, I-N-I, and then Tyler Penrod.
All right. So Nicole, go ahead. And I want to remind you guys, yeah. And I want to remind everybody too that when you make a comment, if you wouldn't mind restating your name and any organization you're with, just for our record. Thank you.
Oh, sure thing. Hi, everyone, and thank you for your time. My name is Nicole. I'm a lifelong resident of Macomb County. I'm an organizer with the Sunrise Movement, and I'm a volunteer with the environmental policy team of Oakland County's 18th District Commissioner, Charlie Cavell. I'm 24 years old, and I've been thinking about climate solutions for as long as I can remember, even since childhood, pretty much. And that's because the climate crisis has been an imminent threat for as long as I can remember. We've known about the threat for so long, but not enough has been done, and now we're in the crisis and on our last chance to do something. The vision that I have for Michigan's path to carbon neutrality is one of systemic transformation, meaning total transition away from fossil fuels, investment in marginalized and frontline communities, and the creation of well-paid green jobs. Michigan needs reliable public transit, we need regenerative agriculture, and we need updated infrastructure for electric vehicle charging, and for our transition to renewable and locally generated energy sources, infrastructure which will increase Michigan's energy independence and create jobs. We need to address systemic environmental racism through strategic investment and to build healthy and thriving communities where sacrifice zones currently exist. And we need to invest in affordable and higher density housing to guarantee homes to all Michiganders, especially considering the wave of climate refugees that we can expect to see in the next few decades. Speaking on behalf of Commissioner Cavell and the work we're doing in Oakland County, local governments need state support to implement the climate solutions described above. Such support could look like facilitating and coordinating regional efforts and centralizing informational resources and best practices, as well as providing consulting, funding, and advising to local governments looking to take action. Some action must take place at the state level. For example, expanded public transit isn't as effective if it's piecemeal and doesn't connect regions, or air and waterway pollution doesn't adhere to municipal lines, so it has to be dealt with at a higher level. Additionally, as someone has mentioned before, state level policies incentivizing solutions such as renewables, natural resource management, improved building codes and building retrofitting, and improved agricultural practices would help local communities to make the necessary changes to reduce carbon emissions. But local communities bring specific strengths too. We have the ability to engage local businesses and other stakeholders, as well as increase democratic participation among the public to develop locally appropriate solutions. Oakland County has committed to net zero emissions by 2050, the same goal as Michigan. And we believe that a strong and concerted effort from both state and local communities is the best way to achieve and ambitiously surpass this goal, which we know we need to do. So I just want to thank everyone for their time, including the other people who have spoken. Thank you for all your hard work, and let's keep working.
All right, thank you, Nicole. I'm looking, Kimber, at our listing here of attendees. I don't have Eric in attendance. Eric, if you're under a different name, you can go ahead and raise your hand when we get to that point. But we'll move on to the next person, who's Tyler, then Kimber. After Tyler, who else we got?
After Tyler, I have Marshall Clabo and Lori Coleman.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Tyler.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you, Jim and Kimber, for facilitating this listening session. My name is Tyler Penrod from the Superior Watershed Partnership. And I wanted to say that the Superior Watershed Partnership is proud to serve a state that takes climate seriously and supports direct action to mitigate the future and present impacts of climate change. As an organization, we applaud this decision to strive for a carbon neutral state by 2050 and stand ready with our Great Lakes Climate Corps to implement hands-on climate resiliency projects in the Upper Peninsula and beyond. The Superior Watershed Partnership is proud of our existing partnerships with state agencies like EGLE, the Michigan DNR, and others, and have the capacity to expand our existing partnerships and embrace new ones to help Michigan achieve this carbon neutrality goal by engaging communities and ecosystems in the Upper Peninsula. Specifically, we upgrade energy efficiency for housing and businesses, install solar energy systems, and implement environmental conservation and restoration projects with our 9 Great Lakes Conservation Corps crews, a program that is poised to continue to expand and serve disadvantaged Upper Peninsula communities. Once again, thanks to Governor Whitmer and her administration for laying this groundwork for carbon neutral Michigan.
All right, Tyler, are you done?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, I wasn't sure. All right, thank you, Tyler, for your comments today. Looking at our list, Kimber, doesn't look like Marshall or Lori are in attendance, even though they indicated they wanted to make a comment, which is fine. We're gonna keep moving on. So who we got next?
Next, I have Jennifer Gagern, Gagern, and Newt Hill.
Okay, so I do have Jennifer. Jennifer, you can go ahead and unmute and go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I came to this late, but I just want to say I am so impressed with everything I've heard. I live in Ann Arbor. I am a nurse and have been concerned and active like around the environment for so many years. And yeah, I just really want to say thank you for doing this. Thank you for everyone who has spoken. I encourage and want to be the voice of a Michigander saying I fully support becoming carbon neutral as soon as possible, being bold, being creative, being leaders in our state. And also really encourage, and I'm very excited about practices such as regenerative agriculture, environmental justice, public transit. And I think we need to recognize from a public health standpoint, the necessity of all the things that you guys are talking about. We end up paying the price in terms of quality of life and healthcare costs when we don't look at all the environmental issues and what it costs to not address these, leading to things like the Flint water crisis or childhood asthma, heart disease, blood, diabetes. All these issues cost our state money. So I guess I'm just saying, let's do this.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Next up is Newt Hill. And then Kimber, if you don't mind putting in the chat the next group of people on deck. And who's up after Newt?
After Newt is Peter Scornia, and I will put the rest in. It'll be the rest of the people who have requested comment in advance.
Great. So that's going to be on the chat. Newt, you should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to make a comment today and the direction that we're all heading together. I'm also really hopeful with the standards that are coming out nationally and the direction our governor has been taking us. One concern I have in the Midwest and in Michigan is the cleanliness of power, electric generation. So the direction of automobile travel looks like it's going to electrification. I did some extensive looking into the options of just buying a car for our family a couple of years ago and was disappointed to find out that a diesel powered family car with a Volkswagen engine that, went through Dieselgate and was cleaned up is going to emit about as much greenhouse gases as a Prius or one of those fancy Teslas when they're connected to the power generation in our state. And some of my friends said, well, here's what we do. We put solar power panels on our house. And I was like, that's great for you, but that's not going to work out for most people. So that's my comment, is that I would hate for us to move in the direction of electrification for automobile travel and then kick the can down the road by not cleaning up the power generation at the large plants. Thank you for letting me voice my comment today.
All right, thanks, Newt, for your comment. We've got, it looks like Peter Scornia, I don't see him in attendance, Kimber. So I'm looking at our list, looks like Diane Mills is the next up. Then who's after Diane?
After Diane is Rita Mitchell.
All right, so Diane, you're unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. I would like to thank everyone. Thank you to the committee, to everyone participating, and then also to Governor Whitmer. It's so exciting to see the progress that we're making. I am, as I said, Diane Mills. I'm the owner of Occupant Care, which is an energy services company based in Michigan. Our client base is primarily owners of commercial buildings, including schools, offices, county fairgrounds, low-income multifamily housing, houses of worship, and hospitals. I have an engineering degree from Michigan State, and I'm a certified energy manager through the Association of Energy Engineers, and I'm also certified in solar and battery design by the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. Occupant Care specializes in the development and design and installation of whole building energy projects. We provide consulting as well as owner's rep, and we've also been involved in the project management and helping to finance these upgrades. I personally have been involved in implementing over $1 million or $100 million worth of energy projects in Michigan during the past 10 years. And recently, Occupant Care completed 10 HVAC assessments at Michigan schools with funding, thank you, provided by Eagle. And we also have conducted investment grade audits at just under 1 million square feet just since the beginning of 2021. Today, I'd like to share my findings throughout the state implementing energy projects, focusing on 4 topics that really interrelate to the success of our goal for carbon neutrality by 2050. I'll focus on 4 pillars: policy, environmental justice, financial implications, and implementation. Why policy? Well, policy is the vehicle that drives us to achieve carbon neutrality. And as Paul from Royal Oak alluded to, these policies are antiquated and need updating. Specifically, I'm referring also to PA 437 and 438 of 2016, which revised and or amended Public Act 295. Let me give you one very fundamental example. Our statutes wrongfully define renewable energy as, and I quote, renewable energy means electricity or steam generated using a renewable resource system. This completely omits geothermal, which is so important, which Paul also alluded to. The correct definition is renewable energy means energy from sources using a renewable energy resource. This would then include geothermal, including using it for heating and cooling. The council adopting some industry standard definitions would be very helpful even when we create our policy. Our definitions are not always consistent with what industry standards are. And this, yeah, okay, this is fundamentally different because geothermal is critical to achieving our goal. And I guess a couple of statements I would like to make just in general. Since our goal is carbon neutrality, I think our incentives and our grants and programs should really be focused on carbon reduction, which Dr. Missy Stutz referred to. Also, I think we really need to focus on specific incentive programs, looking at what affects the private sector, what affects the public sector, especially focusing on, for example, schools with free and reduced lunch. Occupant Care has developed a pilot program to implement geothermal at public K through 12 schools. The benefits are enormous, including focusing on reducing social injustice, creating local jobs. For example, 50,000 skilled trade jobs would be created just by converting Michigan's high schools to geothermal. There are many, many other benefits. So I guess I would like the committee to consider some of the solutions, promote the correct definition of renewable energy and updating our legislation, encourage financial incentives to be based upon reduction in carbon emissions, focus on the implications downstream through to implementation to guard against social injustice, encourage a state investment tax credit for carbon reductions. This is especially important for capital intensive installations of things like solar and geothermal, and then also support a pilot program for geothermal at Michigan K through 12 schools. Thank you again to the council and to Governor Whitmer for making a positive difference. I have my notes written up with additional information, and I'm wondering who I should send them to.
Yeah, Diane, we've got an email you can send those to. I'll be showing it on the screen in just a minute. And I think also, Kimber, if you don't mind putting that email in the chat, we can put it in the chat and we'll read it off later as well. So you can send them directly there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Kimber, I'm looking at our list of people that requested to comment, and Rita isn't in attendance. It doesn't look like Louise is in attendance either. So I'm going to go down to our next person, who's Robert Laporte. And after Robert, who we got?
After Robert is Ayana Craig, and then Raquel Garcia.
All right. So Robert, you should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
So I'm a practicing radiation oncologist in Traverse City. I have privileges at Munson, Cowell Family Cancer Center, and McLaren North. Currently working with other nonprofits in my free time. And I would like to thank Eagle for their support on our project that we're trying to get started with regional composting to keep organic matter out of landfills. And I also would like to thank Eagle for Next Cycle Michigan, because I think that's really a great idea. Fantastic. Keep up the good work. We do need to talk about How are we going to decrease our emissions and what's going to be our energy source? Number one, we do truly need a true market approach to decrease the supply of fossil fuels with the carbon fee and dividend, much like what CCL promotes at the federal level. We need that. The dividends would go back to the neediest families to support social justice and equity by driving down our supply of fossil fuels. I'll mention some other simple things to reduce emissions. I've talked with Dr. Stoltz about this, but I'm trying actively, before I move on across the river, to get a no idling ordinance in the state of Michigan. Somebody have recommended do it at the state level. If for nothing else, I believe Michigan should put immediately into effect a no idling ordinance for vehicles if they leave that vehicle uninhabited. That would be a good start. Wouldn't be all of the idling that goes on, because a lot of people sit in the grocery store parking lots with their cars running, let somebody else run in the summer, they run the air conditioning. This is a huge awareness factor that I think everybody in Michigan should know. Well, we shouldn't have our car running if it's uninhabited. It'd be a great awareness to get the ball rolling, to get everybody realizing, holy guacamole, we really do have to decrease our emissions. The next thing I want to talk about from the supply for market approach, besides the Carbon Dividend Act, we need to put the chokehold on any source of fossil fuel. I'm not a big believer in some of these alternative methods. We need to save all of the money we possibly can for doing research and development on renewable energy mass that we know about, solar, wind, and power. I'm not a big fan of sequestration, not a big fan of carbon credits, biomass, anything that will allow people to keep running on fossil fuels. That's exactly what the fossil fuel interests want. So what else is simple? I love the fact that we are working now with Next Cycle to take food waste and organic matter out of landfills. That's going to be very helpful for decreasing our emissions. It's very simple. It could be easily done along with the no idling ordinance. We also would benefit by taking more pesticides and fertilizers out of use for our current agricultural practices. And speaking of agricultural practices, please stop allowing growing food to put in our gas tank. We know that that is also part of the reason why we have a phosphorus problem causing dangerous algae blooms in Lake Erie and other parts of the Great Lakes. We need to get the phosphorus out. And one way of doing that would be do away with paying farmers to keep growing corn where that manure ends up in the water supply with huge phosphate. So that's one thing to consider also. How we can
1 minute.
1 minute. So Diana DeGette, a representative from Denver, Colorado, is actually calling on some legislation right now to look into the organization that controls building codes. And someone has discovered that there's a possibility that the National Home Builders Associations are being put into this special board. And that is highly questionable because obviously they could be skewing the building codes on their behalf. So we have to really be careful with whatever that national organization is that decides building codes. We have to keep an eye on Representative DeGette. Last but not least, I don't think that nuclear power should be thrown away. I think that they're making now single modular units to put up in communities the size of Traverse City or Petoskey or Bel Air or lots of different small communities to provide heat and electricity. It's not the typical heavy water reactors. The waste isn't as bad. The technology is better. Nuclear and with these small modular reactors in smaller towns, I believe is actually a very good way to consider the transition. And until we get hydrogen power and CO2 recycling, which is, there's a great website called carbonengineering.com for direct air capture. I don't believe in sequestration because it still puts way too much dangerous emissions into the atmosphere. Last thing we need Michigan to support, if we want to get jobs going, we should stop that solar cap right now because I dreamed of being a solar panel installer when I was in college. And right now it's being suppressed by the fossil fuel interests and the energy companies. So ban the solar cap, please. And I'll stop at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir, for your comments. All right, Kimber, I'm looking at my attendee list here, and it doesn't look like we have Ayana or Raquel in attendance here. If you are in attendance under a different name, again, you'll have to raise your hand when we open it up to everyone else. So who after Raquel is on our list?
After Raquel, I have Andrea Wotan and then Allison Sutter.
Okay, thanks. I do have Andrea. Andrea, go ahead.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. A study published in 2020 showed that even if the world stopped burning all fossil fuels today, emissions from the food system alone will exceed the limit required to keep planetary warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius by mid-century. The largest portion of these emissions comes from the livestock industry. The livestock industry is not only a leading producer of methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide, it's also a leading driver of habitat loss, species loss, water depletion, eutrophication, soil degradation, and the emergence of antibiotic-resistant bacteria and zoonotic pathogens. And reducing greenhouse gases is only half the story. We also need to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The best way to do that is to restore natural vegetation like forests and grasslands. The problem is that the livestock sector currently occupies much of the land that needs to be restored. If we are serious about rapidly reducing greenhouse gas emissions, removing CO2 from our atmosphere and saving the planet for future generations, we must downsize the livestock industry. I urge Michigan to take the following 4 steps. First, establish a mandatory timeline and strategy for downsizing Michigan's livestock production. Scientists tell us that the most promising strategy for achieving near-term planetary cooling is to reduce methane. We can do this almost immediately by decreasing livestock numbers. There's talk about reducing methane through new livestock technologies, but these proposed technologies, if they work at all, won't be enough and won't happen fast enough. It's critical to decrease livestock numbers now. Second, provide financial and technical support for livestock and feed grain farmers to transition away from animal ag and into growing crops for direct human use like beans, peas, lentils, fruits, vegetables, and hemp. This strategy will require funding and expert guidance. Please go to transfarmationproject.org to see how one organization is connecting former livestock farmers to the booming plant-based food market. Third, pay farmers to set aside some of their land for revegetation. We can learn from Costa Rica's Payment for Environmental Services program, or PES, that led to successful reforestation. Fourth, establish a plant-rich diet commission to help Michiganders adopt plant-rich diets. Dietary shift would increase the market for Michigan farmers' new plant-based crops and drastically improve health. Research proves that plant-rich diets can prevent and often reverse obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, some cancers, and some autoimmune disorders. I know it's hard to talk about diet in livestock, and this is very bold what I'm proposing, but the future of our planet depends on it. Let's pursue strategies that are a win for farmers, human health, and planetary health. Thank you very much for this opportunity to provide public comment. And thank you for everything you're doing. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you for your comment. All right, so looking at my list, we're going to go to Allison Sutter next, and then Kimber after Allison. Who's up?
After Allison, I have Megan Owens, and then the last person who's requested to speak is Thomas Yazbek.
Okay, and after Thomas, we'll open it up to anybody else that wants to make a comment who hasn't done so already. So Allison, you're unmuted. You can go ahead.
All right, good morning. I'm Allison Sutter. I am the City of Grand Rapids Sustainability and Performance Management Officer. Special thanks to Eagle for hosting this listening session today. I am also a member of the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice. Just wanted to echo my colleague Missy Stoltz's comments from earlier from the city of Grand Rapids. And really, I just wanted to share a summary of some of the biggest obstacles that I am really hoping that Eagle and the state will look to face with respect to this work that I'm really excited that you're doing and leading. The first is there still is just a broad lack of understanding and awareness of what climate change is. It's very scientific, it's very technical. We need to get this in language that is accessible to all people. The same is true in terms of a lack of understanding and awareness of equity and inclusion principles and what that means across the board. And I really think that a huge misstep for most people in the sustainability and climate change profession is that we have spoken and led with protecting natural resources, and we need to be leading with protecting our people. We need to lead with affordability, job opportunities, people's health. And in terms of leading with equity, you need to ensure that Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, are at the table from the beginning, that they are empowered to influence the plan and make decisions and shift wealth building opportunities toward BIPOC. So even if it takes a little bit more time to slow down right now to make sure you have the right people at the table and that demographics at least mirror our state of Michigan, I strongly encourage you to do that now and not to then have to add later after you've already gotten started. I think another huge obstacle is coordinating authentic, accessible, equity-led engagement across the state. Really just want to say, please rely heavily on your local municipalities. We have relationships with our community-based organizations and our BIPOC communities. There are no municipalities represented on the Climate Council. And really, I think it's going to be instrumental that you work with other agencies, the MPSC, the MEDC, the MDHHS, in terms of a lot of the work that needs to be done is actually going to fall outside of Eagle's jurisdiction. Stay focused on climate adaptation. Reducing carbon is important, but changes are here, and our communities, especially our vulnerable communities, are not prepared, and they're having significant impacts. A few others are just, the utilities, they're making voluntary commitments, which I'm grateful for, but they're slow moving and they're voluntary. We need requirements for the utility sector to clean their entire grid at a faster pace. This is the largest source of carbon for urban areas. And if the utilities clean up the source of energy, then we don't have to do nearly as much on the ground within our own local communities. As was mentioned earlier, get rid of the 1% solar cap. We need to work on community solar options. There are extremely poor credits for excess electricity that's being generated through DG, and the lack of incentives for supporting solar development on brownfields is a huge obstacle. I think the last three I have are, Missy mentioned it, but the state building and energy codes currently prohibit local municipalities from enacting more progressive requirements. Adopt the zero code, provide more flexibility for municipalities. There is a lack of data. We need to require the utilities to providing all data transparently so we can understand where we're using energy, why, and how much it costs. This must be disaggregated by race, by ethnicity, and by geography so that we can understand those disparities. And then lastly, it's just a lot of serious work needs to happen on our natural gas infrastructure in light of electrification really being the clear path for decarbonization. So thank you again for the opportunity to share some comments with you today.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to go to our next commenter, Megan Owens, and then after that, it's Tom McAsbeck. So Megan, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Megan Owens. I live in the city of Detroit, and I work with Transportation Riders United, a group that has focused for many years on improving public transportation. And really my main point that I want to emphasize today is the need to make it easier for people to drive less. I do want to pause and thank Eagle and the governor for this important work, especially the recognition that climate pollution comes from a lot of different sources, as recognized in the working groups, and incorporating such a wide variety of government agencies. That's great to see. I also really appreciate the emphasis on equity, because just rebuilding our same economic and social structures based on clean energy, clean electricity does not address the real needs that we have. I do think it's important, obviously, that the climate solutions need to focus on initially renewable energy, energy efficiency, vehicle electrification. Those are certainly sort of the biggest three prongs of the stool. but it can't stop there. As you noted, as James noted at the beginning, transportation is the biggest source, and too narrow of a focus on electric vehicle adoption with little or no emphasis on how much people are driving more undercuts these efforts. The theory that somehow everyone will just buy a brand new electric car completely ignores the underlying system that requires almost everyone to drive everywhere they need to go, drive further every year, a system that kills people who are walking in record numbers, and cuts people off from jobs and opportunities. So we need a different set of solutions to pair with, of course, converting gas-powered vehicles to electricity. I am part of the transportation work group and will be providing some more detailed recommendations, but there's a lot that can be done, starting by simply setting targets for VMT reduction. So decreasing the amount of miles people are driving in the state of Michigan. That would be a really important start. The Minnesota Department of Transportation recently set up a goal for a 20% reduction in vehicle miles traveled, for example. It's also important to stop widening stop widening highways and roads. The first thing you need to do to stop a hole is stop digging, is to fill a hole is to stop digging. So let's stop widening. We need to evaluate the climate impact of transportation projects all across the state. We invest some $2 billion a year in transportation, but we don't have any clue what the climate impact of that investment is. That's got to happen. We need to promote and invest public transportation. Thank you. People want more options. People will ride if they have convenient, reliable options, but we don't invest what's needed. Investing in a state railway network. There's been a lot of interest, but there hasn't been the funding for it. So that needs to be a priority. Enabling safe walking and biking. Fully half of trips taken across the country are less than 2 miles long. And yet the vast majority are done in a car. If we make it easier and safer for people to walk and bike, a lot of those trips could be removed from that auto system. And of course, enshrining equity throughout that. Here in the city of Detroit, fully a third of households can't afford or don't have a personal car. Not for the entire household. So we need to make sure that we are developing a transportation system that not only is good for our climate, but also gives more people more options to get where they need to go. We want to improve equity and access to opportunity as we improve our transportation system. So thank you very much for the opportunity and for these important efforts.
All right, thank you. Okay, next up is Thomas Yazbek. Thomas, you are now unmuted, so go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Thomas Yazbek. I am Megan Owens, the last speaker, kind of said a lot of the things that I wanted to say. I am a member of Transportation Riders United. I'm also a director of a small local public transportation advocacy group called the Rochester Riders. I live in Rochester Hills, Michigan. And we are working to bring public transportation to one of Detroit's suburbs, which is long resisted including itself in the public transit system known as SMART. So I agree with everything that Megan just said, and I just kind of want to add to that and say that, you know, electrification of cars is not the silver bullet that's going to solve everything. We need more public transportation. We need public transportation that not only is more frequent, more reliable, usable, but also that goes to new places. There are so many places in Michigan that are not served by public transportation at all, or are served poorly by it, which cuts a lot of places that people want to go off from people. And you know, we're not going to be able to electrify cars fast enough to, you know, reach the carbon reduction targets we're all talking about for 2030. We need to invest in more public transportation. We need to invest in more non-motorized transportation. There's so many, and we need regional solutions because individual municipalities, especially suburbs, can step in and ruin regional transportation systems. We need the state, we need counties to override these and establish regional transportation solutions that don't leave anybody out. I just want to say, you know, we also, there's not enough progress that's been made on rail transportation. I mostly advocate for buses because they're the cheapest and easiest type of mass transit to introduce. We need more bus rapid transit buses that have their own right of way, but we also should be thinking about moving not only to more passenger rail transportation, but also thinking about switching away from trucks for delivering freight to more rail.
1 minute.
Thank you. So I just want to say that public transportation and promoting active transportation as well, walking and biking, are essential. We can't, the future cars have to recede to the background in the future. They can't be the center of this. We need to be driving less and we need to be relying on cars less. And we need to be thinking also about how transportation relates to zoning and land use, because suburban sprawl is costing our cities a lot. We need to do something about that. We need to promote more density and development. So that's my comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, everyone. So we've reached the end of our list of people who pre-registered and said that they wanted to comment. So now I'm going to open it up to anybody else that would like to make a comment today. And I know a few of you may have come on late. We might have called your name and you weren't in attendance, but if you're in attendance now, of course, you can click the raise hand icon and we'll get to you. And we do got a lot of people who are raising their hands, so I'll warn you. So I remind you to please be courteous to everyone and be mindful of like a 3-minute mark. I'll keep track of it and let you know, because we want to be able to get through everybody and let you comment. Also on the screen, there is an email address. If you feel you get a lot of comments, you're not going to be able to share them all today, you can send them into the email box, just like a written comment. And remind you, we got another comment session on the 5th of May. Let you know that. I'll remind you again about that in a minute. So people are raising their hand. Looks like our first one up is Jim Nash. So Jim, go ahead. You can unmute your line.
Howdy, my name's Jim Nash. I'm the Oakland County Water Resource Commissioner. There was a few things I wanted to cover real quick. The water sector right now in America uses about 4% of all the energy in the country. We're capable of producing enough to to run our systems and have excess power in several areas, but we need help kind of developing these technologies to do it. One of your first callers was about biomass energy. Wastewater treatment plants every day in America landfill or put into farmland hundreds of millions of tons of sewage solids before we release the water. My plant in Pontiac now is extracting methane, natural gas, out of those solids, and we will be able to produce enough to eliminate all the fossil fuels to run our plant and use the solids that we use that we are processing anyway. Again, when the industry standard currently is to just landfill or put these into farmland, though that's anaerobic digestion, which is what produces methane. That comes up out of the ground into the atmosphere, and again, it's a heat trapping much more than carbon. So when we use this process, we're pulling most of the methane out of it in a sealed system that none of this leaks, and we're able to use it on site for our power industry. For our power uses. And also there's flow energy in a lot of our pipes. We know now that building dams out in our natural environment is a significant problem. and we're eliminating them more than we're building them by far. So within our systems, we have places where we can use kinetic energy of water to produce energy. And every city has these pipes underground where there's a potential for creating energy. We need help in developing this and doing some, potential projects that way. Oakland County is now working very strongly on sustainability. We're in the process of hiring a sustainability manager. I'm on the team that's developing our sustainability policies. We're trying to help local governments and local businesses and individuals also in this same process over the same time period. We want to pull everybody with us in turning away from fossil fuels, doing as much as we can to mitigate the future climate change. But also nobody's really talked about the adaptation that we need to do now. Michigan, our biggest issue is storms, is extreme weather. We need to build our resistance to that better. We're having issues with it. We're already, and this is just the beginning of what's going to be striking us in terms of extreme weather over the coming decades. So we need to start investing in mitigating those effects of climate change, not just stopping the increase in the push towards that. So we need investments. We need local help with local regional efforts. I'm working with communities all across Oakland County. We've heard from a couple today. Ann Arbor is pushing this. Grand Rapids has been a leader for years. We have people that really want to help. We have communities that want to help. We have individuals that are really coming to grips now where it's hard to not see that there's climate change. Last year, this January 15th, we had a 3-inch rainstorm come through this area and cause flooding. That is not how our weather has been in our lifetimes. We recognize that this is happening. We need to make sure that the media carries these stories. We need to make sure that everybody understands this. We already are working in the right direction. We just need to make sure that we're working together. Everything that we can do, if you can help us do our investments, if you can help us increase our investments, that's what we need to do. We've talked about briefly workforce development. In my industry, we need more engineers, civil engineers, environmental engineers. We need more just workers. We need trades people because our trades folks are getting older and we need young people in these trades, good paying jobs. These are the people that actually do the work that protects our environment. We need to have them. We need your help in getting new folks into these industries. So I'm here to make sure that we are heard as counties, as local governments, and that we want to have partners at the state government. This is the first time in my lifetime that we've got a president, a governor, and local leaders who are really all wanting to work in the same direction. We have local communities that are interested. We have many people you've heard today, the younger generation that I deal with a lot. I'm an old guy. I feel that we're leaving them in good hands. They understand the problems we're facing. We just need to leave them the resources they use to solve the problems we've given them. I'm just glad that we're here and able to talk about these issues. We've heard many different perspectives. Transportation's vital. One of the things we haven't talked about again, besides buses, is I need some of my large equipment to be electrified. We need electric cranes. We need electric digging equipment. We need more of these things to be done. I have giant.
Excuse me, sir. We're well over time. So if you can.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I thank you. Appreciate your comment. And like I said, we got plenty of opportunities to submit written comments in, and just want to let everybody know we got quite a few people on the lineup here that would like to make a comment. So thank you. And I'm going to get to my next person, who's Lori Coleman. Lori, go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself. Actually, Lori, looks like for some reason it's not allowing me to unmute you. So you might want to try to jump off and come back on because it's saying you got an old version of Zoom. That happens every once in a while. So next person is Mary Ann Bayer or Bauer. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Bayer. I'm a resident of Dearborn. And I really feel that the utility companies are fighting this and fighting against climate change because they have assets that like coal, and they want to build gas plants. So they're interested in making money for their stockholders, and they have no interest in saving money for their customers, and it's like a monopoly. And I feel that these DTE should be made into a service like the post office, a nonprofit, and eliminate the stockholders, because that is what's pushing their agenda and not climate change. And that's my point that I want to make.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. Going on to our next person, Marshall Clabo or Clabo. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Missed my first time around. The world works mysterious ways. I'm working on my upcycled battery project where I take old laptop batteries that were discarded for the landfill. And I would just like to take a step back. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. But as we transition, since 2015, I've been working on a commitment to action lying behind the transition from dirty coal power energy into 100% renewable energy throughout the state of Michigan. And to achieve the statewide increase, I've investigated innovative approaches to implementing economic and technological frameworks that couple private landowners, including farmers across the state, with emerging new cooperative models. The idea, as I've investigated our energy transition going forward to a sustainable universe, I want to keep in the forefront a couple ideas and definitions. So, dating back to 1987, the Brundtland Commission is what keeps me grounded. And the definition of their sustainability is environmentally sound, economically viable, socially just, or equitable, meeting the needs of your generation without compromising life for future generations. That's where we're at in time. The continued burning of fossil fuels will not allow for this. I stand here in my no oil tunnel shirt, no Line 5 oil tunnel. I didn't intend to wear that on this Earth Day, the 51st Earth Day, but I'm here because as we stand, most of us Michiganders in this room, Line 5 still operates until May 12th. We know Enbridge is threatening to keep this moving, keep the tunnel moving. That's what stands in our way right now. We all need to stand up. I really appreciate the Michigan Public Service Commission coming out yesterday, to stand for climate solutions in this fight. And we can't let it be lost that the food of our state, the second most diverse agricultural state in the country, is at risk because of Line 5 every day. We've heard other people talk about it as food as a relationship, buying local, reducing our food miles. It's all very important. Michigan can lead the way. I must highlight, our agriculture. Thank you for the time check. Our agriculture is deep to me. My great-grandfather was one of the first people invited by the indigenous populations of Old Mission Peninsula to teach fruit farming. And so if Line 5 were to rupture and heaven forbid, there's a tunnel that wrecks our land, 100 years down the road, there's no removing concrete from the earth sustainably. We must be led by our indigenous friends, the people of color that have been most impacted by the use of coal and fossil fuel generation energy. It's their neighborhoods and often their highest bills that is at risk. So I just want to leave here today saying thank you everyone for your work, your comments. I want to uplift the work of shutting down Line 5 and no tunnel. None of this work is going to matter if big oil from Canada succeeds in this fight. So thank you and have a very nice Earth Day.
All right, thank you. Okay, move on to our next person for comment. Elizabeth Benyee. Should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead. Elizabeth, you should be able to click unmute there and unmute yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. As a long-term resident of the Upper Peninsula, we have unique problems with energy resources and are in desperate need of green solutions. We are being basically held hostage by a Canadian fossil fuel company for our propane of which a vast majority of us depend on for our heating fuel sources. In addition, we pay the highest per watt of energy of any place in the entire country. And on top of that, have the poorest counties in the entire country. So you can see the dilemma that we are faced with. In addition to that, biofuels industry has decimated our forests up here because our logging companies throughout the entire UP are not held to the same standards and regulations for replanting, land management as the larger downstate companies are, or the larger companies around the country. So you can see that we're faced with a number of huge dilemmas in trying to provide energy resources for residents that live up in the Upper Peninsula. I would please ask every single committee that is engaging in this endeavor of improving clean energy resources to keep the Upper Peninsula in mind and our unique circumstances with extreme weather and extreme circumstances that we face. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing. It is very appreciated. We need to lift the cap on solar. I've been waiting 20 years to be able to put solar on my house and cannot do it because of the cap and because of the limited resources for being able to have alternative energy. Thank you for allowing me to have comments. Everybody have a great Earth Day.
Great, thank you. Okay, next person up that's got their hand raised is Terry Gates. Terry, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, happy Earth Day, everyone. I want to thank the forum that gives citizens a voice to be heard, and also thank the governor for her efforts to position Michigan as a climate change leader in the United States. I have formed a nonprofit called Healthy Planet Strategies that's just kind of getting up and off the ground. And I am a member of the Michigan Council on Climate Solutions Energy Production, Transmission, Distribution, and Storage Work Group. I'm also have gone through training as a Citizens Climate Lobby Advocate. And next week, I'm going to go through training in Al Gore's Climate Reality Project Leader as a project leader. And I am on the member of Caledonia Township where I live, their Citizens Trail Committee. So with that said, the most important solution that I think for climate solution is a change in behavior, which comes through education, because there is not a one-size-fits-all solution. We are all in this together, and significant transformational change needs to happen at all levels of society and across all sectors in order to reduce our collective carbon footprint. There are 3 points that I'd like to make. First, we need to identify who's doing the most emitting of greenhouse gases. If we're trying to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, there needs to be an awareness, transparency, and accountability. The greenhouse gas reporting program through the EPA needs to be broadened. Negative climate impacts need to be prioritized and reported. My second point is that pricing structures need to make anything that emits carbon into the atmosphere expensive. And at the same time, we need to incentivize the transition to renewable energy and make that inexpensive. People will pay for the things that are inexpensive in order to make the change. So that happens from policy. So barriers to the expansion of renewables like solar energy need to be removed. The Michigan House Bill 4236 needs to be passed to eliminate the outdated and arbitrary cap on distributed energy. The third point I want to make is that we need to explore more advanced technologies like direct air capture, carbon capture and storage, geothermal energy, hydrogen, and especially advanced nuclear power.
You have 1 minute.
According to the Department of Energy, nuclear power has reliably and economically contributed almost 20% of electrical generation in the United States over the past 2 decades, and remains the single largest contributor, more than 70% of all greenhouse gas emitting electrical power generation in the United States. Nuclear is evolving into a more flexible energy source that we can work alongside chemical plants and renewable generators to create integrated systems. So again, thank you for your time. Accurate data, pricing systems to help make more renewable choices affordable, and innovation breakthroughs will help transition us into new ways of living.
All right, thank you for your comments today. Okay, next I'm going to try to allow Lori Coleman, but again, it won't seem to work. So Lori, I'm sorry, and I see you got a note here that you have someone else from your group that's going to comment. So sorry about that. Every once in a while we get it, somebody has got an old version of Zoom or something loaded and it won't allow us to mute. So you can always submit comments through the email box as well. So I'll go to Tamara Horn. So Tamara, go ahead. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, thank you. I'm Tamara Horn, and that worked out because I'm speaking on behalf of our group that Lori wasn't able to unmute. Our group is the White Lake Area Climate Action Council, and we're in Muskegon County. We formed last year after a local group read a book called The Future We Choose, and that's written by the architects of the Paris Climate Agreement, Christiana Figueres and Tom Rivett-Carnac. And after we read that book, which I would strongly recommend anyone who hasn't read yet that's on the council that they pick it up and read it. It's pretty short, easy read. We formed our local group to try to scale up changes beyond our individual selves and into our local government. So we're really glad to see that this council is forming at the state level to start addressing and proactively working on more climate issues for our state. We want to emphasize that we need state level help to get people educated and involved at a local level. These broad reaching solutions will have to be everywhere in our lives. And we have noticed in our local area in Whitehall and Montague, which is a relatively small rural city, that we need a lot of help to educate community members on what we're facing and the challenge we're facing and how we all have to do our part to move forward and make progress. So we wanted to share an example of the city of Montague passed a climate emergency declaration in December of 2020. And the first test was last month when a electric mower with a lithium battery that's rechargeable came up for vote at the city council. And it did not pass because it was a close vote, but it did not pass because there were reservations about the sticker shock of the upfront cost. However, when you go back and look at it and you look at the long-term costs and the resaleability of a combustion engine mower versus an electric, it turned out the electric mower would be the lower cost over the long term. So this is an example of how we know that education has to happen so that we can pass these local purchases, even for lawnmowers and everything that we're using in our regular daily lives around town. So I would encourage the council to include anything that can progress speaking more about this openly in our communities, in our workplaces, and in our schools. And we'd really like to see more climate education included in the curriculum at the public schools as well. So thank you again for your time. And I appreciate everyone who's speaking out today.
All right, thank you for your comment. The last person we have up with their hand raised is Eric Ackerman. And just to remind you, if you'd like to make a comment, you can still do so. Click the raise hand icon and we'll call on you. Also, if you're on the phone, we got a couple people on the phone, just hit #2 and it'll raise your hand. So Erica, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a member of the executive committee of the Huron Valley group of the Sierra Club, and basically virtually all the comments have been fantastic. And the only thing I wanted to add was that there are a lot of people who just don't understand what we're facing, and that climate change is real, and how we know it's real, and what the impacts are on people's daily lives. And I would love to see an outreach campaign, like public service announcements on various forms of media, just, explaining both what the problem is and that we have solutions. And I think that they probably need to focus on people who are most likely to be skeptical, and be sure to include the fact that solutions can, if you're working class, there are solutions that you don't have to feel threatened, because there are solutions that will actually provide more work. So that's my comment.
All right, thanks, Erica, for your comment today. Another person has raised their hand, Mary Bauer. Mary, you should be able to unmute.
Well, I hope I'm unmuted. Thank
You're
you for the
unmuted. Go
chance
ahead.
to comment. I'm Mary Bauer. Thank you for the chance to comment. And thank you to Governor Whitmer and yourselves for initiating this project. I'm a longtime Michigander and an arborist, and I think that people have made some really good comments today. And I have a couple myself. For a house to stand, it's got to have a strong foundation. We not only have to have renewable sources of power generation in Michigan, we have to be able to get the power to the points of use. And over my decades in Michigan, we've had a lot of power outages, summer and winter, many of them caused by weather and many of them caused by our beautiful trees in Michigan. The only solution to that is to put the lines underground. I know that's massive. I know that's expensive. We finally have a president who seems to be willing to try and help us subsidize that. I think that's a very big first step in getting people to turn to electricity more for powering their households and their businesses. Another source of power in Michigan that we seem to have been ignoring is wave. We use sun, we use wind, but we have an awful lot of lakes in Michigan, and most of them have waves for much of the year, and those can be used as a source of energy. It also has the good side benefit of reducing destruction along the lake shores. We need to also look at the cost, the true cost of nuclear power. It's not totally a clean energy source. For one thing, like fossil fuels, there's a distinctly limited source of pitch blende. It's not a renewable resource. Also, to cost out nuclear power, you've got to look at not only what it does to the area around the power plant, but the energy costs and energy destruction of mining for pitch blende, refining it, and then the vast cost and possible pollution of storing all the low-level radioactive waste. And Michigan is home to 20% of the world's surface fresh water. That's an incredibly valuable resource. We do not dare to risk polluting that. So for those reasons, nuclear energy is not as good a source of power, perhaps, as others. It's also a reason why Line 5 needs to be carefully considered. We've already had anchor strikes that have damaged the coating of the line. That's a very, very big risk, again, to the fresh water of Michigan. I commend everybody who's doing a great job in trying to find solutions to these, and I hope we go on trying. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for your comment. Okay, thanks for your comment. All right, so James, not seeing any other hands raised for comment. I'm going to turn it over to you for some wrap-up remarks. I know you have some things you want to address. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate everybody kind of joining us today. I thought really great comments across the board. And let me kind of I'm going to touch on a couple of them, but then I'm going to touch on process a little bit. I really liked kind of the outreach and support from our communities across the state. I know most of you are aware we've got a program called Catalyst Community. We're really trying to show where communities can lead, communities can help other communities kind of help address some of these issues. So with COVID, we kind of had to put that program on kind of a lower tier kind of operation, but we're hoping to kind of gear that back up as we get kind of past COVID here and being able to get resources to communities that want to address climate change and really trying to get some connections between those communities that might be further along with some communities that are just starting this conversation locally. I liked all the comments about the need for kind of education and outreach. And I don't think we could start too early on that. So that's a discussion that I think we'll be starting here with Eagle and some of our partner agencies to talk about how we can start laying the groundwork for kind of some of this implementation work that will get increasingly, kind of more challenging as we go forward. I think we've got a lot of things that require a change in life choices. And that does not come without kind of a firm kind of education background, but B, then sometimes it's going to need either access to capital or, kind of access to kind of experts that can help them make those changes depending on kind of the nature of those changes. So this recording was recorded. It will be up on the website. We'll be kind of sharing those links with our council members and our work groups, but we'll also be going through with the work group chairs, kind of the notes we've been taking to make sure that comments that kind of fall into their area, they're aware that there is interest out there. And if someone else isn't raising it within their work group, making sure that things kind of don't kind of fall between the cracks. Again, next listening session is on May 5th at 6 p.m. So again, we'll be looking forward to kind of more input at that point. On the screen now, of course, is where written comments can be submitted and or where you can find kind of more information about our efforts generally. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining us on this Earth Day, and go out, hopefully get outdoors, do a little celebration of the beautiful environment that we all live in. But thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, James. And thank you again all for your comments. I want to remind you that we did record today's listening session and we'll post it up on our YouTube channel probably the next day or so. So be looking out there for that. And again, the next session's on May 5th. That's 6 o'clock, so it's an evening session. Thank you all for joining us and enjoy the rest of your Earth Day. Bye-bye.